Network Africa. Parties to war in Ethiopia's Tigray region agreed to stop the fighting under AU-led peace talks in Pretoria. Kenya deploys troops to the DR Congo to help end decades of bloodshed. Plus, Turkey's President Tayyip Erdogan says Ukraine grain deal to consider African countries struggling with supplies. Hello and welcome to the program today. I'm Layo Olarinde. We begin on a cheery note where peace talks between warring sides on Ethiopia's Tigray conflict held in South Africa over the past week have led to a cessation of hostilities, agreement between the parties, paving the way for the restoration of peace, security and stability in the Tigray region. The peace talks included a high-level panel for the African Union-led Ethiopian peace process, which included former President of Nigeria, Olusegun Obasanjo, former President of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta, the former Deputy President of South Africa, Dr. Phumzile Mlambo Nkuga, and the representatives of the United Nations. Well, the Tigray conflict has been ongoing since November 3rd, 2020, and primarily fought by the Ethiopian federal government and Eritrea on one side, and then the Tigray's People Liberation Front on the other. And this conflict has seen up to hundreds of thousands killed and many destructions.
The two parties in the Ethiopian conflict have formally agreed to the cessation of hostilities, as well as to systematic, orderly, smooth, and coordinated disarmament, restoration of law and order, restoration of services, unhindered access to humanitarian supplies, protection of civilians, especially women, children, and other vulnerable groups, among other areas of agreement. The agreement also takes care of assurance of security for all concerned within and outside Ethiopia, monitoring, supervising, verification of implementation will be carried out by the AU high-level panel. Let me emphasize that the eyes of the world will now shift from the talks to the implementation. The leaders of both sides have supported the delegates to achieve what has been achieved.
This is an opportunity to chart a new course. The young men and women who have been mobilized to fight will now have the chance to return to their homes and their families. They will not have to live with the fear that this day could be their last. And their families will bless you for creating the conditions for them to be with their children. Not because they are not patriotic or ready to support their cause, but because life is a gift to be cherished, and children are a gift to be cherished. We as observers commit to support the implementation of this agreement, the humanitarian response in the first instance, and we are also ready to accompany this process of providing support and assistance in all three regions of northern Ethiopia, Afar, Amhara, and Tigray, that have been affected by the conflict, to help people rebuild their lives.
Joining us now is International Affairs Analyst Yinka Oyeniji. He joins us virtually from East Midlands, UK. Thank you for speaking to us on the program.
Hi, thank you too for having me. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Well, today marks exactly 2 years, since the war in Ethiopia started. But we find ourselves, having a deal that has been reached between both sides, and both sides are agreeing to end hostilities. How do you receive this?
Oh, well, so, I mean, listening to this morning gave me joy because I think that less than 14 days ago, we predicted this exact outcome that we've been able to achieve, which is that we should always allow room for settlement of disputes, even on global stage. And well, Nigerians should be proud. The rest of Africa should be proud that Chief Olusegun Obasanjo was part of this peace-making process that has delivered some respite for the people of Tigray back in Ethiopia. And then, of course, we shouldn't lose focus trying to implement all of these agreements that have been signed. They are vulnerable people. They are the women and the children who require relief materials. And then, of course, just like we attempted to do at the time of our own civil war in Nigeria, it's a period of restoration, of rehabilitation, and reconciliation. And we must give some teeth to the agreements that have been reached for enforceability and to ensure that there can be some block building process that can be measured, over time. It's very easy to destroy. It takes quite some time and some process and some intentionality to build back. So it is a welcome development for that region of Africa and for the rest of the continent.
Indeed, you mentioned former Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo. He was saying that eyes will now shift from the talks to the implementation. In your opinion, do you think this agreement will, finally hold and we can say the war is over? Because, this isn't the first time that a truce and agreement has been reached between both sides. They had one in August, but unfortunately, that collapsed.
I think that the level and the composition of the team that has led this possibly gives us some extra courage, if you like. We have former presidents leading this. Remember, there are also sitting presidents, the president of South Africa, who has been involved in this process. I believe that it is something to be optimistic about. The sustainability is a different question, no doubt. And we cannot yet say who. So what should we do? There will be massive injection of funds that will be required. And we have to institutionalize things like this. So we are talking about the African Trade AfTA agreement. We have the African Union there. We have the African Development Bank. Care must be taken immediately to start to institutionalize those agreements, okay? It's not enough to say now there will be access to relief materials and all of that, but different institutions, just so that we may be able to glean a template from this Ethiopian story that can be implemented in other parts of Africa. So yes, there's every reason to be optimistic. The problems that we have in Africa cannot be solved by total reliance on foreign interventions. It won't happen. So we have to have some homegrown. There has to be co-creation, co-participation. We have to understand like a multi-helixes process of midwifing resolution of disputes, okay? It has to be inclusive. And that's what we've seen with this. It's not driven by France. It's not driven by any of the Western powers. It is the people of Africa saying that we can start to implement and have peace. And then it is all inclusive, and it shows the element of diversity that we have across different cultures, so that even when we are different countries, we speak the same language. We have the Ubuntu spirit in us to say, we want this and we are going to go for it. So it is, I think that the word is first intentionality, and then the second is institutionalizing peace, where everybody comes to the table and says, Ethiopia has been, our pride, our joy. Ethiopia has been standing for a very long time. And so it is unfortunate that the same issues that we have across the continent leading to unrest has plagued Ethiopia itself. So we can't allow Ethiopia to go down in this mess that thankfully we are coming out of. Institutionalizing peace is the word going forward.
And in coming out of this mess, using your words, how does Tigray and Ethiopia now begin to heal? I mean, this conflict has seen the deaths of so many people and lots of destruction.
I think that one of the key elements that we cannot lose sight of, because for me, tell you the truth, I think this is a respite. I don't think that this is the final solution. It's just that this gives us one foot in the door and we can build on it. I think that we should have a separate or a different look about when we are talking identities, okay? What is the bane of the problem between Tigray and the supposed federal government? It is that give us the rights to be able to identify as this ethnic group. I think that we should take another look at it. We must never look at some of these agitations, which sometimes have some legitimacy in them. We must not look at them as if they are tantamount to insurrection or secession and all of that. So we cannot wish that problem away. There has to be a sense of belonging for each ethnic group, no matter how many we are in a country. In Nigeria, over 250 ethnic groups, and we expect that all of them would have the same ideology. We can't foist it on people. We can't force it down on them. We must take another look at this. Any union must guarantee that there's inclusion and people are treated equitably. We must transit from equality to equity. Equality to equity. Equality is no longer the fad. It's no longer serving purpose, but equity. People being treated equitably. Democracy, as it is at this moment, would have to be fashioned out for different people according to how it suits their culture, according to how it suits their beliefs. We cannot foist a certain type of government on other people. So that's a long-term plan, which Olusegun Obasanjo himself should look at. At this time, we are going to bring relief materials in. There's going to be support for these people. But the long term, we must come back to that place. There must be a disarmament, which Olusegun Obasanjo himself said, soak up, mop up the weapons from amongst the people. Peace must be guaranteed. Indeed. The democratic government that they deserve must be implemented so that we never come to this breakdown of law and order and then degenerate into whatever. Ever again.
Indeed. Thank you so much. Yinka Oyeniji, International Affairs Analyst. Thank you for your thoughts.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Well, in the meantime, the World Health Organization Director General, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, says the humanitarian situation in Tigray remains catastrophic, adding that the siege of 6 million people by Ethiopian and Eritrean forces is the worst humanitarian crisis in the world.
This week marks 2 years since the siege of Tigray began. The Afar and Amhara regions are also affected by the conflict, but WHO and our partners have access to those regions and have been able to deliver humanitarian aid. However, the humanitarian situation in Tigray remains catastrophic. As I have said before, the siege of 6 million people by Ethiopian and Eritrean forces is the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. Since the beginning of the siege, food, medicine, and other basic services have been weaponized. It has now been more than 2 months since the last humanitarian aid reached Tigray. But even before that, the aid reaching Tigray was a trickle, nowhere near enough to meet the needs. WHO continues to call for unfettered humanitarian access for the millions of people who are in dire need. And we continue to call on the international community to give the crisis in Tigray the right attention. The only solution to the situation remains peace. And we hope that the talks now taking place in South Africa will lead to a peaceful and enduring resolution.
Still ahead on the program. Welcome back to the program. Kenya's President William Ruto has officially deployed troops to the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo to join an East African regional force aiming to end decades of bloodshed. The 7 countries of the East African Community, EAC, which the DRC joined this year, agreed in April to step up a joint force to fight militia groups in Congo's east. The Kenyan troops will join a contingent from Burundi. Despite billions of dollars spent on one of the United Nations' largest peacekeeping forces, more than 120 armed groups continue to operate across large swaths of East Congo, including the M23 rebels, which the DRC has repeatedly accused Rwanda of supporting. However, Kigali constantly denies the claim.
As neighbors, with various interlinkages, the destiny of DRC is intertwined with ours. We all have a stake in a stable Democratic Republic of Congo, and its security is an obligation that we commit our best effort to achieve. On this deployment, and in the last 48 hours, I have talked to the Secretary General of the United Nations, who has given his tacit approval of this mission. I have talked to the Chair of the African Union, who also concurs under the African Union Peace and Security Council that this deployment is necessary and is important for regional peace and stability.
Burkina Faso's new military leader has visited Mali for his first foreign trip since taking power, holding what his Malian counterpart has hailed as fruitful exchanges on peace and security. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, who seized power in Burkina Faso in a September coup, flew to the Malian capital Bamako for what Mali's foreign ministry says would be a roughly 3-hour friendship and working visit. The two men headed to a VIP airport lounge for private talks before continuing on to the presidency for further meetings with their respective delegations. One of the issues said to have been discussed is the fight against terrorism, referring to the two countries' struggle against jihadists. Traoré ousted Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba, who in January had toppled Burkina's last elected president, Roch Marc Kabore. Over to South Africa, where police have discovered bodies of 19 suspected illegal miners in the mining town of Krugersdorp, west of Johannesburg. The police say in a statement that they responded to a call following the discovery of the bodies in one of the active mines in the area. They say initial investigations suggest that the deceased were moved and placed where they were discovered. It is, however, unclear how the alleged illegal miners died, although the police say they do not suspect any foul play. The police also adds that post-mortem examinations would be done to determine the cause of death. Thousands of unregistered miners operate in the country in search of minerals in disused mines. Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says a deal to free up grain exports from Ukraine will consider African countries that are struggling with supplies. In his words, the situation in Djibouti, Somalia and Sudan is not good at all. If there is a problem in any other less developed countries, we will carry out shipments to these countries. The grain deal was brokered by the UN and Turkey in July, bringing an end to a 5-month Russian blockade of Ukrainian ports that trapped millions of tons of grain and sunflower oil and sent food prices soaring globally. Well, the deal ends on November 19th, when parties involved must agree on extending it. Russia had suspended support for grain exports but agreed this week to restart its participation in the agreement. And back here in Nigeria, it is no longer news that flooding has disrupted people's lives across the country. The economic devastation brought about by the flooding is yet to be quantified. One major infrastructure that has suffered massive destruction is the River State stretch of the East-West Road. In this next report, our correspondent paid a visit to ascertain the level of damage on that road.
A visit to the Uliakata end of the flooded portion of the East-West Road in River State shows that the floodwaters have significantly receded. Lorries and heavy-duty vehicles can now pass through. While this may be viewed as a sigh of relief, it also exposes a massive level of destruction left behind. Collapsed trucks, tankers, and partially submerged vehicles from Uliakata all the way to Mbiama on the boundary with Bayelsa State. With some vehicles unable to navigate the perilous journey, commuters have resorted to wading through the water, while others who can afford it patronize lorries which ferry them across. The Nigerian Navy have provided trucks to take people across at no cost, while a civil engineer explains the need for the government to urgently repair this road.
After the water receded, boats couldn't move anymore because the situation was almost difficult for boats to ply. So we now deployed our trucks, very huge trucks, to equally convey people, because for vehicles it was almost impossible for them to use that portion of the road.
That place is completely filled and it can't be used again. Well, the intervention should be very fast, because this east-west road is like an economic live wire road for the whole of Niger Delta.
The commercial transporters who used to ply this route daily have very grim stories to tell about its impact on their businesses.
The issue is that the passengers are no longer coming out. How will you come out when you enter motor? Maybe 3-4 days you are still on the road.
For now, the waters continue to recede, but the expectation is that work will begin immediately on the damaged portion of the east-west road in Rivers State.
A scholar, Professor Douglas Hardy, who has been researching Kilimanjaro's glacier for more than 20 years, says the disappearance of Africa's last glaciers is bound to have manifold effect on indigenous people living in mountainous areas. Well, this follows a UN report that glaciers in Kilimanjaro National Park, Mount Kenya National Park, Rwenzori Mountains National Park and Virunga National Park will melt by 2050 due to climate change. Authors of the report posit that the glaciers will disappear regardless of the world's actions to combat climate change. We head now to Libya to meet a traveling Italian exhibition that's promoting sustainable designs that's arrived in Tripoli. It's in a bid to inspire Libyans to establish environmental projects.
Spread over a space of 150 square meters, the three co-designed 3R Reduce, Recycle, Reuse exhibition made its way to Tripoli to showcase Italian-made recycled products and sustainable material and technologies.
The idea of the exhibition is to recycle and reuse some of the waste that would have otherwise been buried in landfills, and to inspire people on how to reuse and recycle these things, in addition to preserving the environment. It is excellent to witness the idea of the exhibition and seeing how items were reused.
The project was brought by the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs in collaboration with the Libyan Department of Antiquities and is now open to the public.
I advise youth to take advantage of this exhibition, to think of future recycling projects, to get rid of the garbage piling up everywhere. And I think it would be revolutionary in terms of finding a civilized solution for the garbage and to allow Libyans to create job opportunities.
The exhibition has traveled through the United States, Europe, and the Middle East.
And that's it on the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Olarinde.